The Grammys, of course, were this past Sunday, and many things that were expected. Olivia Rodrigo winning Best New Artist. But there were some surprises in there, including sexual harasser formerly known as comedian Louis C.K., winning a Grammy for Best Comedy Album for his special Sincerely Louis C.K. This award is raising questions, naturally, on what we consider to be cancel culture, or at least what many people love to constantly refer to as cancel culture, and where redemption and forgiveness and return to the public sphere fit into that whole idea. Now, ultimately, it's really not our place, right? To be the ones to forgive or not forgive Louis C.K., at least certainly not as much as his victims, all of which really seem to still have not forgiven him, in part because they never really received a real apology. Now, full disclosure, I, especially growing up, was a huge fan of Louis C.K. And I have watched through certain means. I mean, I think there's a conversation about, do you continue to financially support someone that you really don't want to? But for the purpose of commentary, I have watched both of his most recent specials. And it would be dishonest for me to say that I'm not a fan of most of his work. And it would be dishonest for us, I think, to deny the fact that Louis C.K. is clearly a gifted and accomplished artist. He would never have had the power that he eventually went on to abuse if he wasn't. But I also have to say, when we think about what it is that he did, there's really an effort on behalf of many of his fans still to minimize the damage and the emotional trauma he caused. Now, it can be easy in the face of much more severe allegations of people in this industry, people like Harvey Weinstein, people like Woody Allen, people like Bill Cosby, right? It can be tempting to minimize or at least portray what Louis C.K. did, which is, in his words, ask women if he could masturbate in front of them in professional settings. When I say professional settings, I mean these were his peers, these were other comedians relying on him for work or needing to be in his good graces. Now, I want anyone who's watching this who's a fan of Louis C.K.'s work and is rushing to the comments to defend him or minimize what he did, I want you to consider for just a moment. If your sibling or your mother or even your partner came home to you one night and said, "My boss asked if he could masturbate in front of me," and both of you really needed that income from that job in order to survive. One, do you think that your partner in this situation would be empowered to truly say no if that's what they wanted to say? And two, how would you react to the dude on the other side of that if it happened to a woman in your life? Now, can you really look at Louis C.K. and say what he did was simply weird, some weird kink or some weird fetish, but ultimately not that harmful? A few years ago I had a very weird moment where I saw my mom posted something on Facebook, and it wasn't even that dramatic. My mom's not a political person. If you were to know my mom, like, she is not an activist. She is not a social media warrior. Uh, but she shared an article simply from the perspective of a woman in the workplace. And the article was in the Huffington Post, and it was about how women on a constant basis in the workplace have to fake smile and fake laugh because men in the workplace, rather than simply treating it as a place of business, rather than being professional, grown adults, constantly approach their female coworkers and try to flirt, try to make them laugh, try to advance on them even in the slightest of ways. And women, out of self preservation, out of protection, have to constantly just try to go with it because they don't want to be seen as difficult or dramatic or a problem in their workplace because they need that income to survive. Now, that's all the article was simply about. And it's not something that I didn't know of. It's not like I've never heard of the fact that women have to endure constant advances from men in all public situations. I understood that. I already was well aware of that. But there was something about seeing my own mother share that article and empathizing with it and saying, yes, I am exhausted. I'm exhausted as a human being because I can't just exist as a woman. I have to not only exist, not only try to make a living, not only go to a job that, like most of us, don't actually enjoy. Not only do I have to work my ass off just to get by in this country, but there's that extra layer of also half of the population sees me as a walking piece of meat or as a target or even as a potential partner. When I saw her share that in that moment, I literally started to tear up. I actually got emotional and I was not expecting to. But something about realizing that my own mother can't even just go to work and do her job and do it well because she's a woman. And women have to constantly deal with the fact that men view them as sexual objects first and everything else second. This is not relegated to the stand up comedy industry, it is not exclusive to any one business or office. This is the culture that we live in this country, and it is just as pervasive today as it has always been. And so I really don't know what the answer is here. Do I think Louis C.K. should simply roll over and die? No, I really don't. But I think at the very least, what we're owed, or at least what his victims are owed, is a far more sincere response and a far more evidence that he has ever actually truly grasped what he did was wrong and in particular the harm, the damage that it caused. Now, even if he were to do that, and even if all of his victims eventually grew to forgive him, which frankly is something they don't ever have to do we then say, you know what, welcome back? Here's a Grammy for your album? I don't know. I don't think so. I don't think so. Louis is going to continue to exist, and so long as he exists as a comedian, he's going to want to do stand-up comedy. I understand people have their art, people have their passion, and it really is kind of just part of your DNA. It's something you're going to do. But does that mean that the industry has to fully embrace him? And what we were talking a couple years after the fact when we didn't really get a real apology? This is nothing about whether Louis C.K. is funny anymore or not. I think he objectively is. I don't agree with everything he's ever said, but the vast majority of it, I personally believe, is some of the best material that comedy has ever seen. And his show, when it was on television, every critic in this country was touching themselves over how profound and artistic they thought it was. Even me as a fan, I thought they were overdoing it, but nevertheless, this entire country loved and embraced Louis C.K. for the quality of his work for many years. It is dishonest for us to pretend that that talent, that creativity went away because we realized Louis the person really didn't meet the standards of Louis the artist. But I think there's got to be a space where we hold people a little more accountable than this before fully embracing them and frankly honoring them with arguably the most prestigious award in this category in this industry that a person could get. Now, I asked you for some of your thoughts as well because, gracious host that I am a man of the people. I want to know what you guys are saying. Dorian said, but Hollywood wants to cancel Will, though. This is the we talking about. And that's a good point. As I was just saying, does the industry fully embrace him in a moment when Will Smith, yes, physically assaulted, but if we're being more specific, slapped, not even punched, slapped Chris Rock on the face. And now his movies are being postponed and all this over a slap. But Louis C.K., after sexual misconduct and really a half-assed apology, is returning to full graces and full recognition just a few years after the fact without ever really atoning for it. But much of this country right now sees what Will Smith did as eternally unforgivable and a career ender. Yeah, I don't know. That's a good point, Dorian. Callie said, people love to talk about sexual harassment accusations, quote, ruining lives. And every time I think how nice it would be if that were true. Can't be surprised, though, after two presidents in a row with credible accusers. It's certainly a valid thought. And Beck said, gross. Nice and simple. But I will say, out of everything I have seen so far, and this sort of is still a developing story, my favorite response by far comes from Matt Burnell on Twitter. First, the Hollywood Reporter tweeted, Louis C.K. wins Grammy for first special since sexual misconduct allegations. To which Matt responded, that's a really specific category, but I suppose someone had to win it. I think that's probably the best joke we're going to get out of this situation. So thank you again, everybody, for offering your thoughts. And please subscribe both to this YouTube channel, this Facebook page, wherever you're seeing this, as well as the podcast feed for full episodes soon.